Campaigns have focused their time, money, and attention on 7 key battleground states. We're covering them all with our political team. We begin with Steve Osensami in Atlanta, Georgia. And Steve, we saw those efforts by Donald Trump to overturn the election in Georgia 4 years ago. What impact are they having this time around?
Well, George, there's an argument to be made, of course, that people's memories are short, but in a close election, this could very well matter. For the president's supporters, the drama over the 2020 election results, it's a fist pump, a rallying cry to the polls, and we're seeing that. But the part that's not being said out loud as much is something that Chris Christie mentioned earlier, and that's among independents and some voters on the right who are sick and tired of it all, and who in particular are still upset at the former president's attacks against our very popular governor here, Republican Governor Brian Kemp. There are many people who say that if Trump loses on election night, it will in part be because of his attacks against Brian Kemp at a rally earlier this year. George.
And Steve, extraordinary early vote in Georgia.
Yes, so far about 4 million people have voted, and when you compare that to 2020, we were looking at a total of 5 million votes. It's an incredible number. But I talked with Republican officials earlier, late last week, who point out to some really good numbers that they're seeing. If you look at the counties that have voted, the highest turnout has been in deep red counties. Trump country, they lead the list. The problem is that's not where most of the people who vote and who live in this state are. They are in counties like this one that I'm in, DeKalb County, a majority black county, one of the blue counties in the Atlanta metro area that have all been performing above the state average. So the key is who is, of course, going to show up at the polls. One thing, George, I will end with that is a very key number to look at, and that is that we are seeing about 500,000 new voters since 2020 who have voted already in this election. How those votes fall will make a difference, George.
Okay, Steve, thanks. Let's go to Mary Alice Parks in Charlotte, North Carolina. Both candidates there yesterday, Mary Alice. And North Carolina appears a bit more competitive than people expected at this stage.
Yeah, George, Republicans have won here in North Carolina 10 out of the last 11 presidential cycles. But former President Trump is clearly taking nothing for granted. 4 years ago, this was the state that he won by the slimmest margin. Now, this weekend, in this final push, he has 3 campaign events scheduled here. I was at his rally yesterday just outside Charlotte. It was interesting. He kept the focus on national issues, the border, immigration, the economy. He did say we can't afford to lose the great state of North Carolina. Now, it was also notable that he did not mention Mark Robinson, the Republican candidate for governor here. Robinson has been just embroiled in scandal, really problematic for Republicans. It's part of the reason that Democrats like their chances this year. That and the fact that this has been one of the fastest growing states in the country. Younger, more diverse voters moving to this state. Democrats think that could really play in their favor. Now, if Harris was to flip this state, if she were to flip this state, she'd be the first Democrat to do that since 2008. I was with her on the campaign trail in North Carolina when she was here just a few weeks ago. She went to the eastern part of the state, the more purple part of the state. Activists say that she got a lot of credit for doing that. If she were to win here, it would just really be a big insurance policy for her. It could really open up the map for her, George.
Any strong sense of what impact the hurricane has had on the vote there?
Yeah, look, this is still a real big wild card in this race. So much of the western part of the state absolutely devastated by that storm. Election officials here in the state do feel good that they were able to open up all but 4 of the early voting sites that they had planned. And voters have really turned out. They've already broken records. We know that more than half of all registered voters in this state have already voted. Now, coming into this weekend, more Republicans than Democrats had voted early, but a third of all voters who have voted early were registered independents, George.
Okay, Mary Alice, thanks very much. Let's go to Matt Gutman in Pennsylvania. Matt, all states matter, none more than Pennsylvania.
It's the Keystone State, George, and it is the cornerstone for both of these candidates. They have spent a lot of time here, 19 delegates at stake. This is the undisputed heavyweight champion of the battleground states. Both of the candidates intend to close their campaigns out here. They have been here more than 20 times in recent months. Cumulatively, they have spent more than $600 million in Pennsylvania on TV ads, on billboards, on text messages, tens of millions of them from the Harris campaign alone. The Harris campaign claims that they have built the biggest ground game in the history of elections with 50,000 volunteers, 500 staff, 50 offices in the 67 counties in the state. This is obviously huge for both of them. And what do the polls say? I think Rick mentioned it earlier. They are so close right now, within the margin of error. But the latest poll put them about 20,000 votes apart, or about the number of people who can fit in the 76ers basketball arena, just down from where we are here, George.
And Matt, both sides are prepared for a long and litigation-filled count of the votes in Pennsylvania.
They are, and you see some of that building up already. There were some tweets over the weekend from the Trump campaign alleging that there were, quote, foreigners who snuck into lines in certain precincts and voted. There are allegations and deep fakes of voter tampering. But there are, George, some real serious concerns. We saw that there are about 2,500 voter registration forms in Lancaster County that are now being investigated. In Erie County, which is a swing county, could be very important. The local vendor that provided the mail-in ballots had some significant snafus, and thousands, possibly, of ballots either arrived at the wrong addresses or didn't arrive at all. And the elections officials I've spoken with, Democrats and Republicans alike, are trying to assure the public that this vote is fair, is safe, but they also understand that they are in a race against the clock right now. They've got to finish tabulating all the results as early as they can, Tuesday or possibly early Wednesday morning, before that expected avalanche of litigation from the Trump campaign, George.
Okay, Matt, thanks. We'll go to Nightline co-anchor Juju Chang in Detroit, Michigan, the second state in the blue wall. Good morning, Juju.
Good morning, George. You know, so much depends on the African-American vote here in Wayne County. Behind me, you're seeing early ballots that are being processed. In fact, 41% of all registered Michigan voters have already cast their ballot. Now, you remember Trump broke through the blue wall here by the slimmest of margins, in part because of a lower African-American voter turnout for Hillary, which is why it's seen as make or break for Harris. Now, this is also a time when Trump is appealing to blue-collar workers. This is, of course, Motor City, home to the UAW, and there have been dueling rallies over the weekend, which we covered. The UAW leadership, of course, endorsing Harris and helping her organize on the ground. But some rank-and-file auto workers also held a pro-Trump rally. He's been making inroads by talking about electric vehicles, which is a sore spot for auto workers here. Now, Harris is also appealing to suburban women voters. We were here in 2022, George, when Michigan became one of the first states post-Roe to have abortion on the ballot statewide. That organizing principle helped create a blue wave here in the midterms. And of course, Democrats are hoping that that rallying cry will still be in effect on voting day, George.
And Juju, the Arab American vote is not large across the country, but it could be decisive in Michigan.
Absolutely. Michigan is home to the largest percentage of Arab American Muslim voters. And you remember in the primary that 100,000 voters here voted non-committed as a protest vote for the Gaza war. Now, we've talked to Muslim leaders, and many of them say they just can't bring themselves to vote for Harris. We went to a protest yesterday, but Muslim leaders and imams have come out supporting Donald Trump. Some have warned against Donald Trump, saying that he's even more pro-Israel than Harris. And of course, he was the architect of the so-called Muslim ban. We spoke to one Muslim voter, Zina, who says that her family has voted Democrat for 50 years, but that this time she's voting with the independent candidate, Jill Stein. And then one more voter I want to tell you about, George, Ali, a lifelong Democrat. He actually helped open the Obama field office here in 2008. He says his ballot is sitting on his kitchen table. It is unfilled, and he's going to decide on Election Day. It is a nail-biter here, George.
Okay, Juju, Juju Chang, thanks very much. Terry Moran here at the desk, just back from Wisconsin.
That's right. Spent a lot of time in Wisconsin over the years, and, you know, this is the state that 2 elections in a row has been decided as tight as any other state. 20,000 votes in 2020, 11,000 in 2016. People expect it to be just as tight this time, so it's about turnout, right? And Democrats are happy about one thing. They think they're going to get more rural voters this time around, and that's because of something that happened inside Wisconsin. Their maps for local state offices were overturned by the Supreme Court on partisan gerrymandering grounds, and they think that discouraged Democrats who had nothing to vote for because they were locked in Republican districts, they will come out. And they also see those rural Democrats sort of finding each other on their own, and they've organized them as much as possible.
You know,
enough?
we all saw that Des Moines Register poll yesterday. Iowa, as I said, is not going to be the tipping point state, but a lot of people wonder if the direction you're seeing in the Iowa poll will translate into Wisconsin.
Well, they say that Wisconsin and Iowa are the same except for Milwaukee, and there is truth in that, right? I do think one of the things that you get a sense of in Wisconsin from voters on both sides, they tell you they're exhausted, And yet, the rage and mockery and cruelty the last 10 years, you know, Wisconsin nice is a real thing. And I think the fever is breaking a little bit in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons that Kamala Harris brought Liz Cheney first to Wisconsin to try to appeal to those moderate Republicans.
And they're out there.
Yeah.